The champagne flute slipped from my trembling fingers as Miles stood up, that familiar smirk playing across his lips. Around me, 200 wedding guests fell silent, their faces turned expectantly toward my ex-boyfriend, who somehow thought he had the right to give a toast at my wedding. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. Ladies and gentlemen, Miles began, his voice carrying that same confident tone that had once made my heart race. I've known our beautiful bride Verena for many years. We've shared so many adventures together. I felt Daniel's hand tighten on mine, his wedding ring cold against my palm. My husband's jaw was set in a way I'd never seen before, his dark eyes fixed on Miles with an intensity that made my stomach churn. Something was wrong. Very, very wrong. In fact, Miles continued, raising his glass higher, just last month, Verena and I took a little secret trip together. Nothing like reconnecting with old friends, right, Verena? The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears as every single person in that reception hall turned to look at me. My mother's face had gone pale. Daniel's mother, Linda, looked like she was ready to commit murder. And Daniel was staring at me with a look I'd never seen before. Not anger, something much worse. Disappointment. That's not what he means, I stammered, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to my own ears. Miles has such a weird sense of humor. You know how exes can be, always trying to stir up trouble on your special day. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew it was too late. The damage was done. Daniel slowly released my hand and stood up from his chair. "Excuse me," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the awkward murmur of confused guests. "I need a moment." He walked away from our head table with measured steps, leaving me sitting there in my white dress, feeling more exposed than if I'd been naked. The wedding photographer was still snapping pictures, capturing every mortifying second for posterity. "Verena, honey," my sister Tessa whispered, leaning over from her seat. "What is Miles talking about? What trip?" I couldn't answer her. My throat felt like it was closing up. Around us, guests were starting to whisper among themselves, their voices creating a buzz of speculation that made my skin crawl. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my perfect day. And now it was all falling apart because of Miles and his big mouth. My father Graham reached over and patted my shoulder awkwardly. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, sweetheart. Daniel will come around." But I knew better. Daniel wasn't the type to make scenes or jump to conclusions. He was methodical, careful, analytical. If he was this upset, it meant he already knew something. The question was, how much? 10 minutes passed, then 15. Daniel still hadn't returned to the reception hall, and our guests were getting restless. The band had started playing soft background music to fill the uncomfortable silence, but nothing could mask the tension in the room. "Where is he?" Linda demanded, appearing at my elbow like an avenging angel in navy blue silk. "Where's my son, Verena?" "I don't know," I whispered, and it was the truth. He just said he needed a moment. A moment for what? To process the fact that his new wife was apparently gallivanting around with her ex-boyfriend behind his back. "It wasn't like that," I protested, but Linda's sharp grey eyes, so much like Daniel's, cut right through my weak denial. "Wasn't it? Then explain to me exactly what it was like, dear." Before I could formulate an answer, Daniel reappeared in the doorway of the reception hall. He looked composed, almost eerily calm, but there was something different about him, something final. In his hand, he carried a manila envelope. He walked back to our table with the same measured pace, ignoring the curious stares of our guests. When he reached me, he didn't sit down. Instead, he placed the envelope on the white tablecloth in front of me. "Open it," he said quietly. My hand shook as I picked up the envelope. It wasn't sealed, just folded closed. Inside, I found a stack of papers that made my blood run cold. Hotel receipts, credit card statements, screenshots of text messages, photos of Miles and me at the Riverside Inn, laughing over dinner, photos of us walking hand in hand through the hotel lobby, photos of us kissing in the parking lot. "How did you—" I started, but Daniel cut me off. "How long, Verena? How long have you been lying to me?" Every eye in the room was on us now. The band had stopped playing. Even the waitstaff had frozen in place, sensing the drama unfolding at the head table. "Daniel, please," I whispered, acutely aware of our audience. "Can we discuss this privately?" "Privately?" His laugh was bitter. "Like how you privately discussed your feelings with Miles. Like how you privately booked that hotel room. Like how you privately spent our joint savings on your romantic getaway." The last part hit me like a physical blow. He knew about the money. Of course he knew about the money. Daniel was an accountant, for God's sake. He probably knew exactly how much I'd spent down to the penny. "It wasn't romantic," I said desperately. "We're just friends. We were just catching up, talking about old times. You've been so distant lately, so cold, and I needed someone to talk to. Someone who understood me." "Someone who understood you," Daniel repeated slowly. "Is that what you call it when you're kissing in hotel parking lots?" A collective gasp went up from the nearby tables. I could see people pulling out their phones, probably recording this whole humiliating scene. By tomorrow, this would be all over social media. My perfect wedding would be remembered as the day my marriage imploded in front of everyone I knew. "You're overreacting," I said, grasping at straws. "You're being paranoid and jealous, and you're ruining our wedding day. This is supposed to be about us, about our love, and you're letting your insecurities destroy everything." Daniel studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "Am I overreacting, Verena? Am I being paranoid?" He swiped across the screen a few times, then held it up so I could see. "Because I have 3 weeks' worth of text messages here that tell a very different story." The phone screen glowed between us like an accusation. I could see my own words reflected back at me, messages I'd thought were private, intimate conversations with Miles that Daniel had somehow gotten hold of. "I can't stop thinking about you. Daniel doesn't understand me the way you do. I wish things could be different between us. This weekend away is exactly what I need." Each message felt like a nail in the coffin of my marriage. Around us, the wedding guests were straining to hear, to see, to understand what was happening at the head table. Some had given up all pretense of politeness and were openly staring. "Where did you get those?" I demanded, my voice rising higher than I intended. "You went through my phone? You violated my privacy?" "Your privacy?" Daniel's composure finally cracked, and I could see the hurt and anger he'd been holding back. "You're talking to me about privacy. You've been having an emotional affair for months, Verena, maybe longer, and you're worried about your privacy." "It wasn't an affair," I protested, even as the words felt hollow in my mouth. We didn't." "Didn't what?" "Didn't kiss. Because I have photos that say otherwise. Didn't spend the night together. Because I have hotel records that show you checked in Friday evening and didn't check out until Sunday morning. Didn't use our joint account to pay for your romantic weekend. Because I have bank statements that show exactly where every penny went." The methodical way he laid out the evidence was somehow worse than if he'd screamed at me. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction. This was planned, calculated. He'd been building a case against me like I was some kind of criminal. "You've been spying on me," I said, trying to turn this around on him. "You've been tracking my every move, going through my personal things, following me around like some kind of stalker. What kind of marriage is that? What kind of trust is that? The kind where one person is faithful and the other person is sneaking around with their ex-boyfriend," Linda interjected sharply. She'd been listening to every word, and her face was flushed with anger. "Don't you dare try to make this Daniel's fault, young lady." "Stay out of this, Linda," I snapped. "This is between me and my husband." "Your husband who you've been cheating on. Your husband who you humiliated in front of 200 people. Your husband who just found out his new wife has been lying to his face for months. The word cheating hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I could hear the sharp intake of breath from the nearby tables, could see people whispering behind their hands. My reputation, my carefully crafted image as the perfect bride, was crumbling in real time. I wasn't cheating, I said again, but my voice lacked conviction. Miles and I have history, yes. We care about each other. But it's not what you think. Daniel slid his phone back into his pocket and picked up the manila envelope. He pulled out another sheet of paper and placed it in front of me. This one was different from the others, official-looking, with a law firm's letterhead at the top. "What is this?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Separation papers," Daniel said quietly. "I had my lawyer draw them up yesterday. After I saw the photos, after I read all the messages, after I realized that the woman I married isn't who I thought she was." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Daniel, no, you can't be serious. It's our wedding day. We just got married 3 hours ago. You can't want a separation already." "Can't I? You made your choice, Verena. You chose Miles. You chose to sneak around behind my back. You chose to lie to me every single day for months. You chose to spend our money on romantic getaways with another man. What exactly am I supposed to do with that?" I looked around desperately, hoping for support, for someone to tell Daniel he was being unreasonable. But the faces staring back at me ranged from shocked to disgusted to pitying. Even my own family looked uncertain. My mother, Clara, was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. My father was studying his hands, avoiding eye contact. Only Tessa looked like she might be on my side, but even she seemed confused and hurt. "This is insane," I said, standing up so quickly that my chair nearly toppled over. "You're all acting like I committed some terrible crime. I talked to an old friend. I had dinner with someone who actually listens to me, who actually cares about my feelings. Is that so wrong?" "You had an affair," Daniel said simply. "Emotional, physical, financial. You betrayed our marriage before it even officially began, and now you're standing there trying to convince everyone that you're the victim." "I am the victim," the words burst out of me before I could stop them. "I'm the victim of a husband who's been cold and distant for months, who comes home from work and barely speaks to me, who's more interested in his spreadsheets and his bank statements than in his own wife's emotional needs. You drove me to this, Daniel. Your neglect, your indifference, your complete lack of romantic attention. What was I supposed to do?" The silence that followed my outburst was deafening. I could see the shock on people's faces, could practically feel the judgment radiating from every table. But I was past caring. If Daniel wanted to air our dirty laundry in public, then I'd give everyone the full story. "You were supposed to talk to me," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You were supposed to tell me you were unhappy. You were supposed to give me a chance to fix things. You were supposed to honor the commitment you made to me, to us. You weren't supposed to run straight into the arms of your ex-boyfriend the moment things got difficult." "Talk to you?" I laughed bitterly. "When? Between your 60-hour work weeks and your obsession with Emily's custody schedule? When exactly was I supposed to have this conversation with you, Daniel? You've been emotionally unavailable for months. So you decided to become emotionally available to someone else instead." The simple truth of that statement stopped me cold, because he was right. That's exactly what I'd done. When Daniel started pulling away, when work stress and co-parenting responsibilities made him distant and distracted, I'd turned to Miles instead of fighting for my marriage. But I wasn't ready to admit that. Not here, not in front of everyone. "You know what?" I said, grabbing my purse from the table. "I don't have to stand here and listen to this. I don't have to be attacked and humiliated on what's supposed to be the happiest day of my life. If you want to throw away our marriage over a misunderstanding, then that's your choice. But don't expect me to beg for forgiveness when I haven't done anything wrong." I turned to leave, my wedding dress rustling around me as I headed for the exit. but Daniel's voice stopped me. "Verena." I turned back, hoping to see some softness in his face, some sign that he was willing to work through this. Instead, I saw resolve. "Take the papers with you," he said, gesturing to the separation documents still lying on the table. "My lawyer will be in touch about the next steps." I spent that night at my parents' house, still wearing my wedding dress, because I couldn't bear to take it off. Taking it off would make this real. Taking it off would mean accepting that my marriage was over before it had even begun. My mother had tried to help me out of the elaborate gown, but I'd locked myself in my childhood bedroom and refused to come out. Through the thin walls, I could hear my parents arguing in hushed voices about what had happened, about what I'd done, about whose fault it really was. "She's our daughter, Graham," my mother was saying. "We need to support her." Supporting her and enabling her are two different things, Clara. What she did to that boy was wrong. Dead wrong. Daniel hasn't been paying attention to her. She told me so herself. A woman has needs, emotional needs. If he wasn't meeting them, so she goes running to her ex-boyfriend, spends their money on romantic getaways, lies to his face for months. Come on, Clara, you can't seriously be defending this. I pressed my pillow over my head, trying to block out their voices. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. My parents were supposed to be on my side unconditionally. They were supposed to comfort me and tell me everything would be okay. Instead, even my own father was taking Daniel's side. By morning, the story had exploded across social media. Someone at the wedding had recorded Miles's toast and Daniel's confrontation, and now it was everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. My humiliation was going viral. The comments were brutal. What kind of person cheats on their husband on their wedding day? That poor man, he deserves so much better. She's trying to blame him for her affair. Unbelievable. The audacity of this woman is staggering. There were a few supportive comments, mostly from people who didn't know the full story, but they were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of criticism and judgment. My phone had been ringing non-stop since dawn. Friends, family members, co-workers, everyone wanted to know what had happened, wanted to hear my side of the story, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. What was I supposed to say? Finally, around noon, I forced myself to get dressed and face the world. I had to do damage control. I had to get ahead of this narrative before it completely destroyed me. I started with my closest friends, the ones who'd been bridesmaids at my wedding. Surely they would understand. Surely they would see that I wasn't the villain in this story. "Sarah," I said, when my maid of honor answered her phone. "Thank God. I need to talk to someone who actually knows me, who understands what I've been going through." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Verena," Sarah said finally, her voice careful and measured. "I think we need to talk, but maybe not over the phone. Can you meet me for coffee?" An hour later, I was sitting across from Sarah at our usual cafe, the same place where I'd met Miles so many times over the past few months. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Okay," Sarah said, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. "I need you to be completely honest with me. What really happened with Miles?" "Nothing happened," I said automatically. "I mean, nothing that Daniel is making it out to be. Yes, Miles and I have been talking. Yes, we went away for a weekend, but it wasn't an affair, it was just reconnecting with an old friend during a difficult time in my marriage." Sarah studied my face carefully. "Verena, I saw those photos, the ones Daniel showed everyone. You were kissing him. It was just a goodbye kiss, a friendly kiss. You're reading too much into it. A friendly kiss in a hotel parking lot, after spending the weekend together. Come on, Verena, I'm your best friend. I know you better than that." The accusation in her voice stung. "So you're taking Daniel's side too? You think I'm some kind of terrible person?" "I think you're hurting, and I think you made some really bad choices. But I also think you're not being honest with me, or with yourself, about what those choices really were." I felt tears starting to build behind my eyes. "Daniel has been distant for months, Sarah. Cold, unaffectionate. He comes home from work and barely acknowledges I exist. He's more concerned with his daughter's homework than with his own wife's feelings. I was lonely. I was neglected. Miles was just there. He listened to me. He made me feel valued. So you had an emotional affair with him. I had a friendship with him. A friendship that maybe got a little too close, but that's all it was. And now Daniel is acting like I committed some unforgivable sin. He's trying to destroy our marriage over a misunderstanding. Sarah shook her head slowly. Verena, listen to yourself. You're still not taking responsibility for what you did. You're still blaming Daniel for your choices. Because it is his fault, at least partially. If he'd been a better husband, if he'd paid attention to me, if he'd made me feel loved and appreciated, I never would have turned to Miles in the first place. That's not how marriage works, Verena. When you're unhappy, when you're feeling neglected, you talk to your spouse. You go to counseling. You work on the problems together. You don't sneak around with your ex-boyfriend and then blame your husband when you get caught. I stared at her in disbelief. You're supposed to be my friend. You're supposed to support me. I am supporting you. I'm trying to help you see the truth so you can fix this before it's too late. But I can't support you in lying to yourself about what happened. Fine, I said, standing up abruptly. If that's how you feel, then I guess I know where we stand. Verena, wait. But I was already walking away, leaving Sarah sitting at the table with her coffee and her judgment. If my own best friend wouldn't support me, who would? The answer, as it turned out, was almost no one. Over the next few days, I reached out to friend after friend, trying to find someone who would listen to my side of the story without judgment. But the viral video had done its damage. Everyone had already made up their minds about what kind of person I was. Even worse, Daniel had been busy. His lawyer had filed the separation papers officially, and now I was being served with documents requesting temporary spousal support, division of assets, and a formal accounting of all joint expenses, including the money I'd spent on the weekend with Miles. The legal reality of my situation was starting to sink in. This wasn't just a fight that would blow over. This was the end of my marriage, and it was going to be messy, public, and expensive. But the worst part wasn't the legal complications or the social media humiliation. The worst part was watching Daniel move on with his life as if our marriage had never mattered to him at all. He'd already moved out of our house and into a temporary apartment. He'd changed his relationship status on Facebook. He'd even started dating again, according to mutual friends who seemed to take great pleasure in updating me on his activities. Meanwhile, I was stuck living in my childhood bedroom, fielding calls from lawyers and trying to figure out how my perfect life had fallen apart so quickly. The turning point came when I ran into Emily, Daniel's 9-year-old daughter, at the grocery store. She was with Linda, Daniel's mother, and the look of pure confusion and hurt on that little girl's face broke something inside me. "Verena?" Emily said, her voice small and uncertain. "Are you and Daddy getting divorced?" I knelt down to her level, trying to find the right words. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have problems that are hard to fix. But you just got married. I was at your wedding. I was the flower girl." The simple innocence of her question hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about me and Daniel anymore. This was about a little girl who'd already been through one divorce and was now watching her father's second marriage fall apart. "I know, baby. I know it's confusing." Linda stepped forward, her expression stern but not unkind. "Come along, Emily. We need to finish our shopping." As they walked away, I heard Emily ask her grandmother, "Is it because Verena doesn't love Daddy anymore?" Linda's response was quiet but clear enough for me to hear. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people don't know how to love the way they should." Standing there in the cereal aisle, still holding a box of cornflakes, I finally understood what I'd done. This wasn't just about my marriage to Daniel. This wasn't just about my feelings or my needs or my loneliness. This was about a family that I'd helped destroy with my selfish choices. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something other than anger or self-pity. I felt shame. 3 weeks after my wedding day disaster, I was sitting in a sterile conference room across from Daniel and 2 lawyers, trying to negotiate the terms of our divorce. The irony of discussing the end of our marriage before we'd even had a chance to begin it wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Daniel looked different, thinner, maybe, but also somehow more solid, more sure of himself. He'd gotten a haircut and was wearing a suit I'd never seen before, a navy blue one that made his eyes look even more intense than usual. Mrs. St. Clair, his lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Rebecca Martinez, was saying, "My client is prepared to be reasonable about the division of assets, given the short duration of the marriage. However, he is requesting reimbursement for certain expenditures made from joint accounts without his knowledge or consent." She slid a document across the table to me. It was an itemized list of every penny I'd spent on Miles over the past 3 months. Hotel rooms, dinners, gifts, even the gas money for driving to meet him. The total was staggering. $3,247.83. "This is ridiculous," my lawyer, a tired-looking man named Bob Fletcher, said. "My client was entitled to spend money from joint accounts. They were married." "They were married," Rebecca agreed, "but she was spending marital funds on an extramarital affair. That constitutes dissipation of marital assets." "It wasn't an affair," I said, the words coming out automatically, even though I'd stopped believing them myself. Daniel spoke for the first time since we'd sat down. "Verena, please, we're all adults here. We've all seen the evidence. Can we at least be honest about what happened?" His voice was calm, reasonable, but there was an edge to it that I'd never heard before. This wasn't the gentle, patient Daniel I'd married. This was someone harder, more decisive. "Fine," I said, feeling cornered. "Maybe I developed feelings for Miles. Maybe I made some mistakes. But you weren't exactly husband of the year, Daniel. You were cold, distant, unavailable. You drove me to this." "I drove you to have an affair?" "You drove me to seek emotional connection elsewhere, yes. If you'd been meeting my needs as a husband, none of this would have happened." Rebecca and Bob exchanged glances. Even my own lawyer looked uncomfortable with my response. "Mrs. St. Clair," Rebecca said carefully, "are you saying that your husband's alleged emotional unavailability justifies your decision to engage in an extramarital relationship?" "I'm saying that marriages are complicated, and it takes 2 people to make them work or fail." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Verena, I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for our wedding. Our $40,000 wedding that you insisted on having. I was distant because I was exhausted from trying to give you everything you wanted while also being a good father to Emily. I was stressed about money, about work, about blending our families. But I never once considered that as an excuse to cheat on you. You never once considered my feelings either." "Your feelings?" For the first time, Daniel's composure cracked slightly. "I bought you flowers every Friday for 6 months. I planned surprise date nights. I wrote you love notes and left them in your lunch bag. I rearranged my custody schedule so we could take that trip to Napa Valley that you wanted. What exactly did I not do for you, Verena?" The specific examples hit me like slaps. Because he was right. He had done all of those things. But somehow, in my mind, I'd minimized them or forgotten them entirely. I'd focused only on the times he was tired, the evenings he spent helping Emily with homework, the weekends when work stress made him quiet and distracted. "That was before," I said weakly. "You changed. You became different." I became a man under pressure, trying to balance work and family and a relationship with someone who apparently needed constant validation. But I never stopped loving you. I never stopped trying. I got tired. The honesty in his voice was devastating, because I could see it now, looking back. I could see how my constant need for attention, for reassurance, for grand romantic gestures had worn him down. I could see how my complaints about his work schedule and his parenting responsibilities had made him feel guilty and inadequate. But instead of talking to him about it, instead of trying to understand his perspective, I'd turned to Miles. I'd sought validation from someone who didn't have to balance all the real-world pressures that Daniel was carrying. "I want to work on our marriage," I said suddenly. "I want to go to counseling. I want to fix this." The room fell silent. Daniel studied my face for a long moment, and I saw something that might have been sadness cross his features. "Verena," he said gently, "you had an affair. You lied to me for months. You spent our money on another man. You humiliated me in front of our friends and family. And even now, sitting here, you're still trying to blame me for your choices. How exactly do you expect me to trust you again?" "Because I love you. Because our marriage is worth fighting for. Because everyone makes mistakes." This wasn't a mistake. This was a series of deliberate choices made over months. You chose to text him. You chose to meet him. You chose to spend the night with him. You chose to lie to my face every single day. Those weren't mistakes, Verena. That was betrayal. The finality in his voice scared me. "So that's it? You're just giving up? You're throwing away our marriage without even trying to save it?" "I'm not throwing it away. You already did that." Rebecca cleared her throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should focus on the practical matters at hand. Mr. St. Clair, are you willing to waive spousal support in exchange for Mrs. St. Clair's agreement to reimburse the dissipated funds?" Daniel nodded. "That's acceptable." "Wait," I said, panic rising in my chest. "I don't have $3,000. I can't pay that back right now." "Then we can work out a payment plan," Rebecca said smoothly. "The important thing is establishing the principle." "The principle?" "That actions have consequences," Daniel said quietly. "That you can't spend our money on your affair and expect me to just absorb the loss." I looked at my lawyer desperately, but Bob just shrugged. "It's a reasonable request, Verena. Dissipation claims are common in divorce cases involving infidelity." "This is insane. You're all acting like I'm some kind of criminal." "You're not a criminal," Daniel said. "You're someone who made bad choices and doesn't want to face the consequences. But the consequences are real, whether you want to face them or not." The meeting dragged on for another hour, hammering out the details of our divorce. Division of wedding gifts, return of engagement rings, custody arrangements for Emily, who I'd grown to love like my own daughter. That last part was the hardest, because Daniel made it clear that he didn't want me to have any ongoing relationship with Emily. Not because he was trying to be cruel, but because he was trying to protect her from further instability. "She's already been through one divorce," he explained. "She doesn't need to be confused about family relationships or loyalties. It's better if we make a clean break." "But I love her. She's like a daughter to me." "She was like a daughter to you for 8 months. I'm her father forever. I have to do what's best for her, not what makes you feel better." By the time we left the lawyer's office, the terms of our divorce were essentially settled. Quick, clean, and devastatingly final. But Daniel wasn't done with me yet. "Verena," he said as we stood in the parking lot outside the law office, "there's something else we need to discuss." "What now?" He pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. It was a social media post from Miles, dated just 2 days ago. In the photo, Miles was at a bar with his arm around a young blonde woman. The caption read, "Moving on to bigger and better things. Davro's single life. Now no regrets." I stared at the image, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. What is this supposed to mean? It means that while you've been telling everyone that you had a deep emotional connection with Miles, that you were soulmates who found each other again, he's been bragging to his friends about his conquest. It means that while you destroyed our marriage for him, he's already moved on to someone else. The words hit me like physical blows. That's not possible. Miles loves me. He said he'd always loved me. Miles used you, Verena. He saw an opportunity to break up my marriage and stroke his own ego, and he took it, and you let him. I wanted to argue, wanted to defend Miles and our connection, but the evidence was right there on the screen. Miles looked happy, carefree, completely unburdened by any thoughts of me or our relationship. "I'm not telling you this to be cruel," Daniel continued. "I'm telling you because I think you deserve to understand what really happened here. You didn't lose our marriage because you found your true love. You lost it because you fell for a manipulative ex-boyfriend who never had any intention of building a real relationship with you." He put his phone away and started walking toward his car. "Daniel, wait," I called after him. He stopped and turned back to me. "I'm sorry," I said, and for the first time, I truly meant it. "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the affair, for the lies, for humiliating you at our wedding. I'm sorry for destroying our marriage and hurting Emily. I'm sorry for being selfish and blind and stupid." Daniel studied my face for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was sad but not unkind. "I believe you are sorry, Verena. I think you're finally starting to understand what you've lost. But sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back my trust or my respect or my love. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation or the betrayal or the months of lies. So there's no chance, no possibility that we could ever—" "No," he said simply. "There isn't. You made your choice, and now we both have to live with the consequences." He got in his car and drove away, leaving me standing alone in the parking lot with the wreckage of my life scattered around me. 6 months later, I was living in a small apartment across town, working at a new job because my old HR position had become too uncomfortable after the viral wedding video. I'd paid back the money I owed Daniel through a payment plan that left me broke most months, but I'd honored the agreement. I thought the worst was behind me. I thought I'd hit rock bottom and was slowly climbing my way back up. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was getting ready for work. It was Rebecca Martinez, Daniel's lawyer. "I'm sorry, Ms. Duvall," she said, using my maiden name. "I need to inform you that my client will be filing additional legal action against you." "Additional legal action? For what? We're already divorced. I've paid back the money. What more does he want?" "He's filing suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress and public humiliation." The wedding video has now been viewed over 2 million times across various social media platforms. It's been featured on several gossip blogs, and even mentioned on a morning talk show as an example of wedding disasters. My client has suffered significant reputational and professional damage as a result of your actions. I sank onto my couch, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what she was saying. "He's suing me. For how much?" $50,000 in damages, plus legal fees." $50,000? I don't have $50,000. I don't have $5,000. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change the legal reality. Your actions at the wedding and your subsequent behavior have caused measurable harm to my client's reputation and emotional well-being. He's entitled to seek compensation. This is insane. He's trying to destroy me financially. He's trying to hold you accountable for the consequences of your actions. There's a difference. After Rebecca hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, staring at the wall. How had my life gotten to this point? How had I gone from being a bride to being sued by my ex-husband in the span of 6 months? I called my parents, desperate for support, for someone to tell me that Daniel was being unreasonable. "He's suing you," my mother said, her voice shocked. "Can he do that?" "Apparently he can. Mum, I don't know what to do. I can't afford a lawsuit. I can barely afford my rent." There was a long pause. Then my father's voice came on the line. They'd put me on speaker. "Verena," he said, his tone careful, "maybe it's time to consider settling this." "Settling? With what money?" "Maybe it's time to consider apologizing. Publicly, sincerely. Maybe if you took full responsibility for what happened, acknowledged the harm you caused, Daniel might be willing to drop the lawsuit." "You want me to humiliate myself even more than I already have?" "I want you to take accountability for your actions," my father said firmly. "I want you to stop playing the victim and start acting like an adult who made serious mistakes." Even my own parents were tired of supporting me. Even they could see that I'd brought this on myself. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I watched the wedding video. All of it. From Miles's toast to Daniel's confrontation, to my pathetic attempts to blame everyone but myself for the situation. Watching it with 6 months of perspective was brutal. I could see clearly now what everyone else had seen that day. I could see my manipulation, my gaslighting, my complete refusal to take responsibility for my actions. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who'd been caught cheating and was desperately trying to avoid the consequences. The comments on the video were even worse now than they'd been initially. Thousands of people had weighed in with their opinions about my character, my marriage, my fitness as a human being. Some of the comments were genuinely cruel, but many of them were just accurate. She destroyed that man's trust and then tried to blame him for her affair. Disgusting. The way she keeps saying it wasn't an affair, while there's literal photo evidence, the delusion is real. That poor little girl having to watch her stepmom destroy her family. Daniel dodged a bullet. Better to find out what kind of person she is now than after 10 years of marriage. Reading comment after comment, I finally understood what Daniel had been trying to tell me. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. This was about who I was as a person, about the choices I'd made, and the way I'd handled the consequences. I'd spent months feeling sorry for myself, focusing on what I'd lost, on how unfair everyone was being to me. But I'd never really considered what I'd put Daniel through, what I'd put Emily through, what I'd put our families and friends through. I'd made my affair everyone else's problem, and then I'd gotten angry when they didn't want to enable my victim narrative. The next morning, I called Rebecca Martinez back. "I want to settle," I said. "I'm listening. I'll make a public apology, a real one. I'll take full responsibility for what I did and acknowledge the harm I caused. In exchange, Daniel drops the lawsuit. I'll discuss it with my client and get back to you." 3 days later, Rebecca called back with Daniel's response. "He'll accept your proposal with conditions. The apology must be posted on all your social media accounts. It must specifically acknowledge your affair, your lies, and the damage you caused to him and his daughter. It must be sincere and complete, with no attempts to justify or minimize your actions. And it must remain posted permanently." Permanently? He wants to ensure that if anyone searches your name in the future, they'll see that you took accountability for your actions. It was a harsh condition, but I didn't have a choice. I couldn't afford a $50,000 lawsuit, and I certainly couldn't afford to lose. "Okay," I said. "I agree." Writing the apology took me 3 days. I went through dozens of drafts, each one more honest and more painful than the last. Finally, I had something that felt true, even if it was devastating to post. 6 months ago, I blew up my marriage at my own wedding reception. I cheated on Daniel with my ex, spent our money on hotels, lied to his face for months, then stood in my wedding dress and tried to blame him when he found out. I posted the truth on Friday at 3 p.m. I cheated, I lied, I destroyed everything. Daniel did nothing wrong. This is on me. Then I turned my phone off and hid at my parents' house like a coward. Monday, the comments weren't kind, but they were fair. At least she finally stopped gaslighting everyone. 6 months late, but okay. Daniel deserves a medal. 2 weeks later, one text from him. "Thank you for that. 4 words. No forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. It was more than I deserved." 3 months after the post, the mail brought his new marriage certificate. Daniel and Jennifer. Quiet ceremony. Emily smiling in the photos. No drama. No viral meltdown. Just a family that works. I kept the announcement in a drawer. A reminder. A scar. 6 months later, I saw them at a restaurant. Emily laughing so hard she almost tipped her water. Jennifer catching the glass without missing a beat. Daniel squeezing her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. They looked easy, happy, whole. I paid my check and left before they saw me. Some people get to rebuild. Some people just get to watch from the outside and finally understand what they threw away. Daniel got his second chance. I got the truth. And for the first time, the truth is enough.